I'm Ethan Brooks, 42 years old, a single guy living in a modest house on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. A few weeks ago, on a random Tuesday morning, I stepped out to my front yard with my trusty mug of black coffee, ready to mentally prep for a day of remote work. But the second my feet hit the grass, I nearly spilled my coffee in shock. The ground was soaked, puddles pooling everywhere like a flash flood had rolled through overnight. I glanced around. Clear skies, not a cloud in sight. Weirder still, the old garden hose coiled up by my garage felt warm to the touch, as if someone had used it just minutes before. I live alone. No wife, no kids, not even a dog to blame for any messes. This house is my quiet retreat after long days wrestling spreadsheets and emails. I don't have a sprinkler system, just a beat-up green hose I snagged from Home Depot 3 years ago, mostly for washing my car or watering the lawn when I remembered to. So, what the hell was going on? My yard looked like it had been tended by a pro landscaping crew, but I hadn't lifted a finger. I took a sip of coffee, standing there in the middle of my soggy lawn, racking my brain for a logical explanation. Did I forget to turn off the spigot last night? No, I hadn't touched it in a week. Was someone in the neighborhood pranking me? I decided to dig deeper. Circling to the backyard, I noticed the soil there was damp too, though not as bad. The tiny orchid plant near the fence, a gift from my mom last year, was still alive, but looked like it was drowning. I told myself maybe my drainage was busted or someone had spilled water from somewhere. But that warm hose kept nagging at me. Someone had used it, and I needed to figure out who. For folks like us living in quiet American suburbs, little oddities like this can be the first sign of a bigger mess, especially when you've got neighbors who are, let's say, unique. As I'm about to explain, the puzzle pieces started falling into place when my water bill arrived that weekend. I tore open the envelope, and the numbers staring back at me nearly made me drop my coffee again. $178. Normally, my bill hovers around $40, enough for showers, laundry, and the occasional rinse of my Ford Escape. But $178? I don't have a pool. I don't throw parties. And I sure don't water my lawn that often. This was the kind of spike you'd expect if I'd left the tap, running 24/7 all month long. I plopped down at the kitchen table, staring at the paper, trying to recall anything out of the ordinary. Nope, nothing. My backyard's just that half-dead orchid and a rusty folding chair I left out from last summer. I'm not the type to waste water. Water in Colorado isn't cheap, and I watch every penny. So where was it all going? I started paying attention to the folks around me. My neighborhood's small, maybe 20 houses, and people are usually friendly, waving at the mailbox, chatting about the weather or the Broncos. But there's this one newcomer who moved in 2 months ago, Linda Grayson, 55, living in a house across from mine. Linda's not like the rest. Within her first week, she was strutting around with a notebook, jotting down notes about this neighbor's fence height or that one's window color. She's not the HOA president. We don't even have a formal HOA, but you'd never guess that from how she acts like she owns the street. I'd seen her standing in front of Jim's place 2 houses down, chewing him out for leaving his trash bins out past pickup day. Another time, she knocked on my door to remind me my grass was a bit long by her standards, even though I mow every couple of weeks. Linda's got that vibe of someone always ready to stir the pot, with her perfectly dyed blonde hair and pristine white sneakers that look like they've never touched dirt. Back then, I didn't peg her as the hose culprit, but staring at that $178 bill, suspicion crept in. Was Linda messing with my water? I decided to keep an eye on her, not full-on stalking, just casual glances from my window while I worked. If she was behind this, I'd catch her soon enough. And in America, where neighbors can be your best buds or your worst enemies, I knew I might be gearing up for a little showdown over a stupid garden hose of all things. The mystery of my waterlogged lawn and skyrocketing bills started to unravel one crisp Saturday morning in late September. I just pulled into my driveway after a quick run to the grocery store, arms full of bags with milk, cereal, and a 6-pack of Coors when I saw her. Linda Grayson, my 55-year-old neighbor with a knack for meddling, was in my front yard, bold as brass, dragging my green garden hose across the grass like it was her personal property. She wasn't sneaking around either. This was broad daylight, the sun high over Denver's suburbs, kids biking down the street, just a few houses away. She hooked my hose up to a shiny new pressure washer and started blasting her front porch, the water jetting out in a satisfying arc that made her weathered wooden steps gleam. I froze in my tracks, grocery bags dangling from my hands, watching this woman who'd already critiqued my lawn and Jim's trash habits casually steal my water. She caught my eye mid-spray, flashed a big fake smile, and yelled over the noise, "Hey Ethan, hope you don't mind just giving the porch a quick rinse." Like we were old pals swapping favors. Mine. I was dumbfounded. This wasn't borrowing a cup of sugar or asking to use my Wi-Fi password in a pinch. This was my utility, my bill, my hose. I didn't even get a chance to respond. She just turned back to her task, humming some tune I couldn't place, completely unbothered. I stood there gripping the steering wheel through the car window I'd left open, torn between storming over to yank the hose back and just letting it slide to avoid a scene. I'm not a confrontational guy. Years of working in customer support taught me to pick my battles, but this felt personal. Linda had crossed a line, and not a subtle one. I opted for retreat, hauled my groceries inside, and slammed the door a little harder than I meant to. Peering through the blinds, I watched her finish up, coil my hose back sloppily, and saunter home like she'd done me a favor. That's when the tension hit me. This wasn't a one-off. If she was this shameless on a Saturday morning, what had she been doing all those other times my yard turned into a swamp? For Americans like us, living in tight-knit neighborhoods where good fences make good neighbors is practically gospel, this kind of entitlement stings. I couldn't shake the image of Linda treating my stuff like it was hers, especially knowing that $178 water bill was probably her handiwork. I needed to do something, but what? Yelling wouldn't faze her. She'd probably just wave me off with that clipboard of hers. I had to be smarter. I decided to put an end to Linda's free water buffet. With a practical fix, that afternoon I drove to Ace Hardware, grabbed a $10 hose lock, a simple metal clamp that screws onto the spigot, and installed it right then and there. It wasn't fancy, but it would keep the hose secure unless someone had the key, which I tucked safely in my kitchen drawer. Problem solved, I thought. No more midnight hose heists. No more mystery puddles. I went to bed that night feeling like I'd outsmarted her. A rare win for a guy who'd rather binge Netflix than feud with neighbors. But the next morning shattered that illusion. I stepped outside with my coffee, expecting a dry lawn and a locked hose, only to find the lock gone. Not just unlocked, gone. The clamp had been sliced clean through, jagged edges glinting in the sunlight like a crime scene. My stomach dropped. Someone had used bolt cutters. Bolt cutters on my property. The hose lay there, slightly damp, mocking me. I scanned the street, and sure enough, there was Linda out in her driveway, scrubbing her silver Honda CR-V with my hose hooked up to a fancy nozzle she must have bought just to rub it in. Water sprayed everywhere, soaking her gravel and trickling into the gutter. Water I'd be paying for. I marched over, trying to keep my cool, and asked, "Linda, did you see what happened to my lock?" She didn't even pause, just glanced up with that same fake smile and said, "Oh, that thing? It was a hazard. Someone could have tripped. I took care of it for you." Took care of it. I stared at her, speechless, as she went back to scrubbing her tires like she was doing a public service. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was a power play. Linda didn't care about rules or boundaries. She thought she was untouchable. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was up against a suburban dictator who'd stop at nothing to get her way. For folks in America, where personal space is sacred, this was war, and I wasn't about to lose. I decided to up my game, installing a tiny motion-activated security camera under the eaves near my spigot. It wasn't a Ring doorbell or anything flashy, just a $50 gadget from Best Buy that could catch her in the act. And it did. Over the next week, I collected footage of Linda sneaking into my yard before dawn, dragging my hose to water her rose bushes, fill a kiddie pool for her grandkids, even rinse off her patio furniture. Each clip was time-stamped, crystal clear, and infuriating. I had her dead to rights. Armed with evidence, I posted a short clip to our neighborhood's Facebook group. Caught my neighbor using my hose without asking. Thoughts? The response was instant. Comments flooded in, from "that's insane" to "call the cops." People were outraged, and for a minute, I felt vindicated. But Linda didn't back down. She doubled down. 2 days later, a letter slid under my door from our informal HOA committee, a group of busybodies Linda had wormed her way into. It accused me of unauthorized surveillance and creating a hostile environment, demanding I pay a $300 fine for violating community standards. The kicker? Linda had filed the complaint, claiming my camera made her feel unsafe. Unsafe. She was the one trespassing. I called the HOA's unofficial leader, a guy named Dave who lived 3 doors down, and offered to show him the full footage. Hours of Linda stealing my water, racking up my bill to $178 last month alone. He sighed through the phone and said, "Ethan, we'd rather you two sort this out privately." She's got half the committee on her side. Half the committee? Linda had turned this into a suburban Game of Thrones, and I was losing allies fast. She even started spreading rumors. Glenn, the guy with the hammock, told me she'd call me paranoid at the last block party. My water bill was bleeding me dry, my neighbors were picking sides, and the HOA was useless. For Americans like us who just want to grill in peace on weekends, this felt like a nightmare with no end. I was trapped unless I could turn the tables. Staring at that HOA letter, I refused to let Linda win. I'm no lawyer, but I've got a stubborn streak and a decent Wi-Fi connection, so I started digging. Late one night, fueled by coffee and spite, I combed through the HOA's bylaws buried in a PDF on some outdated website and struck gold. Section 3.1c. Any resident found trespassing on private property to utilize utilities without consent shall face immediate fines and potential suspension of community privileges. It was right there in black and white, Linda's Achilles heel. Every time she'd stepped on my lawn, she'd broken the rules. My camera footage wasn't just proof of theft, it was a legal sledgehammer. But I didn't stop there. Inspiration hit while I was driving past the construction site near the edge of our subdivision. A crew was setting up a portable sewage tank for a row of porta potties, big, industrial, and reeking of possibility. I pulled over, chatted up a worker named Mike, and pitched a vague story about testing drainage solutions for my yard. He shrugged and said, "Sure, man, just don't break anything. And let me borrow a hookup for a night," after I slipped him a $20 tip. Back home, I rigged a secret weapon, a valve splitter buried under my lawn, connecting my spigot to 2 lines. One for clean water, one piped straight to that sewage tank. I controlled it with a remote switch from my garage. The hose looked normal, but if Linda turned it on, she'd get a nasty surprise. This was my game changer. For folks in America's suburbs, where property lines are sacred and petty feuds are sport, I'd found a way to flip the script. Linda thought she could bully me into submission, but now I had the upper hand, legal ammo in one pocket, a literal stink bomb in the other. She'd never see it coming. And when she did, it'd be a reckoning she couldn't wash off. I reset the camera, coiled the hose like bait, and waited for her next move, knowing the next spray wouldn't just be water, it would be justice. The trap was set, and Linda Grayson took the bait. Just as the sun peaked over Denver's rooftops, I've been up since 5 a.m., sipping coffee in my garage, eyes glued to the camera feed on my phone. At 6:32, there she was, sneaking across my lawn in her pristine sneakers, dragging my hose like it was her birthright. She hooked it to a spinning sprinkler she'd bought, probably from Walmart, and planted it smack in the middle of her yard. With a smug twist of a spigot, she unleashed hell. The first sputter was normal, then came the gurgle. Her head tilted, confused, right before a jet of thick brown sewage blasted out, soaking her lawn, her patio, and her precious white Adirondack chairs. The sprinklers spun wildly, painting her suburban kingdom in stench. Linda's scream could have woken half of Colorado. She slipped, flailed, and bolted to shut it off, but not before the mess coated her legs. I watched it all unfold, a grin creeping across my face. Neighbors poked their heads out. Jim dropped his newspaper. Glenn filmed it on his phone. Linda wrestled the hose like it was a snake, shrieking about lawsuits. But the damage was done. I stepped outside later, pretending to check my mailbox, and she stormed over, reeking and furious. "You'll pay for this, Ethan," she spat. I shrugged, all 42 years of my patience distilled into one line. "You wanted water, Linda. You got it." She huffed off defeated. The footage hit our Facebook group by noon, tagged Karma in action, and exploded. The HOA couldn't ignore it this time. My bylaws printout and video backlog forced their hand. Linda got slapped with a $500 fine for trespassing. Her HOA clout evaporated, and within a week, a for sale sign sprouted in her yard. She moved out quietly, leaving the street peaceful again. For Americans like us who crave a quiet cul-de-sac over petty wars, it was a win worth savoring. My lawn dried out, my water bill dropped, and I learned something: push a suburbanite too far, and they'll push back with a hose that bites. Now I water my orchid in peace, and the neighborhood feels like home again.